What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I wanted to show you guys another vehicle I have found that is going to be insanely good for the ice track. So obviously everybody does know that in episode 2 we did get the new ice tracks here on the Crew 2, which is basically the tracks being covered in ice, making them very hard to use with pretty much any of the vehicles. So if you pretty much drive most of the cars like the Bugattis and all that, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare because the cars really do not handle at all on the ice, which does honestly make sense because, it's, well, ice. But a lot of the Bugattis are obviously going to be an issue, and for example, I did try out the Devo, and my goodness, that car was a nightmare. Now, most of the hypercars and the street cars are most likely going to struggle tremendously on the ice tracks, which again really does make sense, unless you want to pick the Dodge Charger RT Masked Edition, which for some odd reason, that car obviously doesn't struggle in any way possible. But I did find another vehicle in the hypercar class, which honestly blew my mind, is going to be the Creator's KS Masked Leader. This vehicle actually became available a long time ago in one of the motor passes, and well, it turns out the KS Masked Leader is actually going to be a really good vehicle for the ice tracks because it doesn't actually slide at all, similar to the Dodge Charger. What's really funny is when this vehicle was in the motor pass, I was honestly kind of confused on why they added this vehicle. I was like, I don't think anybody's going to actually use this. What's the point of actually having like a health bar on the vehicle? I even tried racing this thing in some of the hyper races, and my goodness, it was not that great. But it does seem like this vehicle is going to have some type of purpose now in this game with going into like all these ice tracks here. Because my goodness, guys, it is so much better than basically everything else. So one thing I have noticed when racing this vehicle, for example, which I will show footage in the background, is for one, this car literally doesn't slide at all, as I mentioned before. It basically goes around the track like you guys would see like an F1 vehicle or a touring car on one of the tracks as well. That's how this vehicle is going to act. So you can pretty much go as fast as you possibly want and then hit your brakes and the car won't go anywhere. It will actually grip completely, which is kind of funny to me because, well, I have been trying out a lot of these different vehicles, and when I actually thought about it, I was like, what if the Masked Leader is similar to the Dodge Charger in the street class? And it turns out this vehicle is going to be one of the best cars for these races unless Ubisoft does do something to them. I would honestly be pretty surprised if Ubisoft did actually nerf the masked vehicles because for one, the Dodge Charger is available to everybody in the Street HQ, but unfortunately the Creator's KS is not available anymore because it wasn't a motor pass, so if players do have this vehicle, they can obviously use this in many of the ice tracks, and then other players do not have access to it. So I could probably see this being a bit of an issue because, for example, if we did jump into one of the summits there and it is no restriction, a lot of the players are probably going to use the KS Masked Leader because there's really no other reason to use anything else. So having cars like this are going to give everybody a big advantage on that because these vehicles are going to be the best overall options to pick on the ice tracks no matter what. So for example, if we did have a summit and it was no restriction, I would almost guess that every single person is going to use the Creator's KS because there's no other reason to use a different hypercar knowing that they're not going to be able to do these races and or easy for that matter. I had a feeling a lot of players, including myself, were most likely not going to use this car because I just did not see a point of really running this thing at all compared to pretty much anything else. I mean, yeah, the car has a health bar, which I don't think completely matters all that much in a race, but then again, after hitting a couple of things, the car did seem to perform a little bit differently. But if you are racing this thing on the ice track, which I would say everybody's probably going to start using this vehicle for that, you really can't hit that many things because the car grips the ground so well like an actual race car. And luckily you really cannot crash into many things on these tracks because the only thing on the track you can actually hit is most likely going to be the guardrails around it, which luckily driving the KS Leader here, you're probably not going to run into any of those because the car is literally eating the ground the entire time. But I did decide to actually jump into the Bugatti in the same event there to really see how different it's going to be. And honestly guys, it's kind of insane how bad all the hypercars are on these events. Now obviously it's on the ice, so I really can't get mad at that for any reason, but driving the Bugatti then jumping back into the leader is honestly kind of insane how different they are. So for example in the Bugatti, which I will show background gameplay of that, you can pretty much go as fast as you possibly can, and then you're going to end up sliding into the guardrail no matter what, because for one, the car can't stop in time, and I also noticed going that fast in those vehicles, you cannot go around the turns going that quick. The car is always going to slide, basically costing you more time around those turns, and you're going to be a lot slower in one of those compared to like the Masked Leader and or the car that was in the street class as well, which is the Dodge Charger. So you're going to find yourself having to go a lot slower around those corners, and you really don't have much of a choice. And then when you come out of them, you're going to have to speed up a good amount, get to the next turn, then slow down once again, or you're going to slide into next week like you always would on these tracks here. Because when I looked at the leaderboard last summit and I saw everybody using the Dodge Charger, I was like, well, this has probably got to be a bug or something like that. Then I ended up jumping into the vehicle and I honestly could not believe the fact that the car was gripping that well. And it seems like the creator's KS in the hypercar category is going to be the exact same thing. But the biggest difference, guys, is the fact that you can actually buy the other car. You cannot get this vehicle in the hypercar category anymore because, well, it is an old Motor Pass vehicle, so it's not actually available. Could this vehicle come back in the future? To be honest, I highly doubt it, but we really never know. Maybe they could bring like another version of it, who really knows, but I do think this car is going to get a lot more love now, and with this thing being so much better than basically every other hypercar on the ice track, I feel like most players are going to use this. Now, one thing I do want to mention though, guys, is if you did not get this vehicle, do not worry, because I have a weird feeling most of the summits are probably not going to be no restriction. I would be kind of surprised if it actually was, because a lot of players would end up using this vehicle. This would end up putting you at a big disadvantage because every single hypercar is going to struggle on that ice track, but this one does not at all. So I do think this is going to be very interesting to see what happens with the future summits and all that with these vehicles being this good. But if you guys do have the creator's KS Masked Leader, I do recommend trying out this car on the ice track because it's probably going to make you laugh, similar to the Dodge Charger RT as well. I mean, I was honestly mind blown by this. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below, because when there is more ice events released for the hypercar category, I will definitely be trying this car out more on those and seeing if something does change with it. But again, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, because this is very interesting, the fact that these vehicles are this good. I'm personally interested to see if these cars are basically going to take over all the events, unless they tie each one to a specific vehicle.